Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Mouse Ears and Magical Chats. I'm Mary Beth. I will have Jess with me this weekend. We're going to Disney, but today I was hoping to talk to you about going to Disney if you have some mobility concerns. So, the first thing I want to say is that sometimes the most intimidating part is not even Disney itself, which we all know can be somewhat intimidating because of all the planning. It's just getting there that can be intimidating, especially if you have a mobility issue. My dad had lost his leg a few years ago, and when it happened, we had a Disney trip planned before he would get his prosthetic leg. So I could talk to before having a leg and after because we decided we're still going to go. So the first thing was obviously, maybe not obviously, but when my dad traveled before he had his prosthetic leg, flying was a huge concern. But airlines were incredibly accommodating. At the airport, they helped transfer him into one of those special narrow aisle wheelchairs that can fit down the plane aisle, which was such a big deal because it made it possible to get him safely to the seat and just get him to the seat in general because he couldn't be mobile on his own without having to hop. So he could hop maybe one or two to move himself around into a seat. But outside of that, it was very limited. So having that and he could just scooch on over, it was perfect. And when we landed, staff at the airport were just as helpful. They are there waiting with a wheelchair and are able to get us all the way down to baggage claim and help navigate the airport in general. So if that's your first fear, don't let it. They have it all figured out. They have done it many times. So you don't have to worry. When you buy your ticket, or for us, like we had already bought our tickets, you just need to let the airport know that you're going to need some assistance and they're ready as soon as you get there and you'll be one of the first ones on the plane. So just make sure that you're asking beforehand. So let's talk about Disney transportation from the airport to Disney. So once we landed in Orlando, we used Mears transportation. So this used to be the Magical Express, and now it's a paid transportation system that can get you to Disney. It's down on that first level where you get your baggage claim, all the way at the end, all the way. But so once we landed, that was another place where accessibility really mattered because how else were we going to get my dad who can't really ambulate on his own there super easily. So once again, a thing that I loved was Mears had an option that the back of the bus has a lift, which means that someone can stay right in their wheelchair and ride safely to their Disney resort. So it came down, they rolled him on, they had attachments so that his wheelchair wouldn't go anywhere. And that was huge, especially during that first trip when my dad didn't have the prosthetic. Now he can walk up the stairs and be able to sit down in the mirrors thing, but it was fabulous that we did not have to worry about that. And instead of doing extra transfers and extra physical stress, after already navigating the airport and the flight, he was able to just stay in the wheelchair and get right to the resort. And honestly, after a travel day, reducing the number of transfers can make such a difference in the comfort, the energy, and the stress. So that first day, even before we stepped foot in the park, Disney already felt more possible because the transportation piece was manageable. And then let's talk about scooter rentals because that's a game changer. Once we got to the resort, the next big piece for us was the scooter. I had ordered a scooter through ScooterBug, which, as our favorite rental company now, we go with ScooterBug every time. They also work with Disney, so they can bring scooters directly to the resort. They can bring them to the parks, as far as I know, if you're having an issue. So, favorite company so far. And one of the reasons I love them is because they deliver and it's there at the resort every time before we even get there. So made things much easier. So once we arrived, my dad was able to transfer from his wheelchair to the scooter. And these are just left if you go up to the bellhop they'll be able to bring the scooter out and around for you. And so once we got him on the scooter, from that point, he really had the freedom to get himself where he needed to go. And I think that independence mattered, especially like he had lost his leg. And from that moment on, people needed to help him with almost everything until he got that prosthetic leg. So all of a sudden, he had this independence that he hadn't had in a while, which was a little heartwarming for me, right? So Disney, in another way, has my heart. And it's not just about logistics, it's about that dignity, right? The comfort, the confidence, and being able to enjoy your vacation instead of feeling like every movement is a challenge. And the scooter did that for us. If you know your family is going to need a scooter, I would highly recommend arranging it before the trip so you don't have to worry about it. And it's easy. You just go on their website and do it all via the website. And the one time I did have an issue with the scooter, I called them and they had a new one out by the time I think we came back from lunch or something. So, really great to work with. So, let's talk about best Disney resort strategies for mobility needs. So, the one thing we've learned over time is that where you stay matters. When you're traveling with a mobility disability, for our family, we like to stay something where it makes it easy to get to multiple parks. So, staying over in the Epcot resorts, you can usually walk to Epcot, Hollywood Studios. So, like this last trip, we went and stayed at Beach Club, where like he can scooter right into Epcot, or we didn't go to Hollywood Studios, I don't believe, until the end when we had already changed resorts, but he could scooter over or take the boat. But also, what we found works for our family is Skyliner access. Why? Why Skyliner over anything else? Because the Skyliner is pretty amazing with a scooter. So you can literally just drive right on. They have a special section for the mobility scooters, which actually has saved us some time in line too. But so you can literally drive right on. Your family can be with you. Only one scooter per Skyliner, though. So if you're going with people with multiple scooters, they come around about every 3 minutes, the scooter ones, because they pull them off to the side and then you can get right on. But it's not like a complicated transfer at all. You just drive on, you sit there, and then you drive right back off at the end. So that's why we liked staying at a place with Skyliner access, but the buses are still accommodating and Disney transportation does work really well. But I think in probably most people's experience, the buses can take a little bit more effort and patience because getting a scooter loaded can be more of a process. They have to like drop the bus, you're going in, they have to get you all arranged and set up, and then they can let everyone else on. So, Skyliner is definitely one of our top tier things on that. So, making it a little easier, I'd pick a Skyliner route if possible. So, let's talk about parks themselves. They're way more accessible than what people realize. Once we got into the parks, this was honestly the part that surprised me the most. The parks were much easier to navigate than I think a lot of people realize. Disney does a really good job of helping guests understand accessibility on attractions. Their maps, their resources that show which rides allow a wheelchair or scooter directly on the attraction. So I had looked them up ahead of time so that I could know what we're going to do on each ride. Some of the rides allow you to bring the scooter right up to the ride vehicle. So I specifically think about It's a Small World. You can actually get right on that with your mobility feature and you can just sit there on the boat. Where other ones, you're able to get your scooter right up to the ride vehicle and then scoot over. And that one, I was thinking about, oh, why can't I think of the name of it right now? That's incredibly helpful. So on the first trip, when my dad had no prosthetic leg, we had to think about everything differently but Disney made it workable. Then once he had his prosthetic leg, it opened up even more options. Now he can access pretty much anything he personally feels comfortable doing. And I think the key is it becomes less about can we do Disney and more what feels comfortable and enjoyable for us. So that shift is everything. So one of the specific examples I was thinking of where it's not as accessible and you want to think about maybe slightly different accommodations was like Pirates of the Caribbean. That's one of the rides where you have to be able to, it'll say like you have to be able to take one step. So you step down into the boat, which can be tricky when someone has a mobility disability or uses a prosthetic. The one thing that's helped us is that in those boat rides, we ask for the front row. The front row actually gives you a little bit more room so my dad can extend his leg and maneuver a little bit easier. And it's making getting in and out of the boat a little smoother than one of those smaller rows in the back. That's one of those small tips that might sound minor, but it makes a huge difference for us. So don't be afraid to ask a cast member questions or explain that what would help. In our experience, they have been wonderful and they really do try to accommodate what we ask for. And when it comes to dining in the parks or at the resorts, that hasn't been a problem either. Even on that first trip, restaurants, including buffets, always allowed my dad to bring the scooter right into the restaurant up to the, like when we were in a buffet, he could go through the buffet line in the scooter, and instead of a chair, they bring the scooter up to the table and he just kind of moved the chair around so that he could eat at the table. So they have no issues with making that a solvable problem. And when you're on vacation, it's those little comforts that really matter, especially when you want to eat. There's one thing I do want you to take from this video is that Disney is a trip you can still take even without a leg, and we know it. And I know that sounds simple, but after a life changing medical event, that kind of normalcy and joy means everything. Was it different? Yes. Did we have a plan to do more originally? Absolutely. But was it still magical, doable, and worth it? 100%. Disney really did make it worth it for our family, from the airline help to Mears transportation to ScooterBug to accessible park navigation to the kindness of the cast members. Thank you. So if you're someone you love is worried about a mobility disability and think that Disney's off the table, I hope our experience shows you that it doesn't have to be. If you have questions, leave them in the comments because I would love to do a follow-up video with even more detailed tips if you need them. And if this video has helped you, make sure you like, you subscribe, you stick around for more Disney planning trips and real life Disney experiences here on Mouse Ears and Magical Chats. Hopefully next time I'll have my co-pilot Jess back and we will see you on the other side. Bye.